My full name is Emil Abraham Fish. I was born in April 9, 1935 in a little town, eastern Slovakia, called Bardiovská Nová Ves. My father, Alav Shalom, rest in peace, had a grocery store on the main road to the town, and my mother was helped him in the business and was a homekeeper, kept the family, and my sister, we all lived there. My childhood was really very simple, and the kids went to Cheder. So the Cheder was about 3 kilometers from our village. It was a simple Cheder. It was very dark, very ugly. My teacher was not a very nice gentleman called Avish. If you didn't behave, he punished you. They didn't take any nonsense. It's really one of these old typical Cheders. My father at one time was in the lumber business, and we had a lot of relationship with non-Jews, and they were all positive. He did a lot of favors for them. And so I was in contact with a lot of non-Jews, which is not typical for a Jewish kid growing up in a Hasidic or in a home. I grew up with violence between the Goyish kids and ourselves. We always, had violent history. We never could walk on the street without either being beaten up or fight with them, it was just part of our nature. The Germans never came to the village. It was all done by the Slovakian Linkowa Garda, by the local anti-Semitic police. They were basically collecting the Jews and taking them to be transported to concentration camp. I was only 6 years old, and there was a lot of commotion because there was a list of who's going and who's going to be picked up. And that was my first remembrance of the commotion. Everybody had the reaction, how do I save myself not to be on the list to be transported or taken away? So we were very fortunate because my father was, by that time, was a big businessman, and they had an exemption list of whom they're not going to send to concentration camp because the Slovakian government realized that a lot of businesses cannot be run without the Jews. So they put a partner to every business, and then they had an exemption list. So everybody was trying to be on the exemption list. And then a lot of Jews were hiding other Jews who were supposed to be transported, so they cannot catch them. And my grandfather and my nephew, my first cousin, were hidden during the 41 in our house, so they cannot find them and put them on a transport. Between the age of 6 and 9, we lived with restrictions and realizing that we are Jews and they're anti-Semites, and nobody knew what's going to happen. Nobody knew what's going to happen the next day. The Germans in certain parts of Europe gave people option, either a band or a star. In our city, most of the people were wearing bands. Like Jews, after certain hours, couldn't walk at night. They couldn't go to park. They couldn't go to public places, and so on. So it was just part of our nature. The people from Bardiov, especially the girls that they collected, were the first transport to Auschwitz in 1942, official transport. Auschwitz was open before, and there were people there, prisoners. But official transport came of 1,000 people, and about 200 were from Bardiov, more or less. When we were into actual hiding, I was 9 years old. By the time I got to be 9, we understood that they're trying to kill all the Jews. So there's a big difference between 6 when it started and 9 when I went into hiding. Because every day was something new, and we just got used to it. Being persecuted, you get used to it, and you anticipate that nothing good is going to happen. In 1942, the transportation in Slovakia stopped and did not pick up till 1944. In 1944, the the Slovakian anti-Semitic government said that all the Jews from East Slovakia had to move to west in the area of capital. And so we moved there to a town called Nitra. And we were there a few months. And then the order came that all the Jews have to be collected in Slovakia and sent, and we went into hiding in 44, and after a few months in hiding, we were literally caught in Bratislava by the Gestapo, and we were sent to concentration camp. And that was in 1944. You realize what's happening. You're hiding from being caught, so be sent to concentration camp. So you just follow order. You mature very fast. You know when, you learn when to talk, when to keep quiet, not to be obvious that you're Jew, and try to minimize your exposure to be caught. The parents, you know, made 2 suitcases, and they were mostly clothing and a little food too. We were living in a town called Nitra, and my father was known to be a very smart man, and he rented a house at the edge of the town, literally the last house in town, which was cemetery, because he knew that one day he's going to have to escape and run. And my mother, every morning, most Jewish mothers, every morning they would get ready for breakfast for the kids. So they would go to the grocery store, pick up bread, pick up milk. And so my mother went into town to pick up bread and milk, so we have breakfast. So the family's breakfast. On the way back, there was a railroad crossing, and they were collecting the Jews. At the railroad crossing, usually there was a Slovakian guard, and this time there was a German guard, actually a German Gestapo guard there. And he told my mother that she's Jewish. And my mother had a little blonde hair, and she didn't really look Jewish. And she spoke a slang Slovakian, not a formal Slovakian. So she said, no, I'm not Jewish. And the German guy says, yes, you're Jewish. And she says, no, I'm not Jewish. Do I look Jewish to you? Do I speak Jewish to you? He said, well, I know you're Jewish. And the Gentile guard told the German guard, she's not Jewish. She crosses by every day. He knew she was Jewish, but he said, she's not Jewish. She comes in by every day, and I see her every day, and she's not Jewish. Leave her alone. So he left her alone. She ran to her house, and she told us they're collecting the Jews. We collected a suitcase, and we started walking towards outside of the town, not knowing exactly where we're going, just to get out of the reach of the town. We didn't know where we were going, so it was a rainy day, raining, and so we hid in a vineyard, but not a small vineyard. Some grapes grow almost like trees. It was a tall vineyard, and we were hiding there in a farm about 2-3 kilometers out of town for about 2 days till it was raining, and my father finally said, we can't be under a vineyard for days. So he knocked on the door of the farm, the farmer's door. Luckily, he was a Baptist. Baptists are friendly to the Jews because of their philosophy about Jews and Israel. And my father said, well, we are in the bag and you need to hide us. He said, I can't hide you because next door a friend is hiding Jews, and I think the whole neighborhood is under suspicion. My father said, well, you don't have a choice because what are we going to do? So he gave us a place in the attic over a barn where there were cows and pigs. And then we stayed there for about 3 months or so. It was a V-shaped attic. We couldn't get up. You couldn't stand up. You could only sit. And my parents were just sitting, laying on that, and they gave us paper and crayons. That's what we were doing with my sister. We were doing crayons all day long. After Nitra, we realized that we can't be longer, and meantime, my parents arranged for Gentile papers, non-Christian papers. So we went to Bratislava to hide under Christian papers. In Bratislava, we were hiding in a very fancy apartment that my father arranged, and we were sure that that's going to be our last hiding place, and we're going to wait out the war. And that's when we were caught. It was September 28th of 1944. The order came by the Gestapo. Any Gentile who's hiding Jews is going to be executed or put in prison. We want all the Jews out. And that night, a lot of Gentile turned Jews in, and the place where we were hiding turned us in, and the Gestapo at midnight picked us up. At midnight, we were taken to the Gestapo headquarters, and in the morning, we were taken by truck to a collection camp, Seret, which is basically a collection camp. And in Seret, we were there, I think, one night, and then the next day, they took everybody out of the barracks, and they separated the men from the mothers and the children, and we were sent to, we were put in a cattle car, like 60, 70, and the mothers and the children were supposed to be sent to Auschwitz, but they couldn't get it to Auschwitz, so we ended up in Bergen-Belsen, and my father ended up in Buchenwald. Well, our feeling was we already got used to persecution, but the worst thing is when they separated the father from us. That was because it's very hard to describe, but we start crying. Why is he going? Why is he leaving us? We were always together. And I don't know if we completely realized what's happening, but we were mature enough already to realize that there's a chance we'll never see him again. And then he left, and the last thing he told my mother, if we survive, we come back to hometown. The train was a nightmare because there were too many people in the car, and there was not enough water, and not enough food, and the mother was trying to keep the kids quiet, and it was just a mess. They opened the doors of the cattle car or the cars, the wagons, and there were a lot of lights, a lot of Germans, a lot of trucks, dogs, and screaming, fast, move, and they put us on trucks, and they took us to the barracks. But it was a commotion. It was just screaming, yelling, and get out, and we ended up in Bergen-Belsen. I think we were the only ones that were never separated. They never separated us from our mothers, and this is one of the questions since then we were trying to figure out why. My sister and I were never separated from my mother. Well, you got into the barrack, and they told you there were 5 or 6 people to find a place to sleep, and there were tiers of beds and straw mattresses, if I remember, and we found a place, and there were 3 of us. We went all in the same location, my sister, my mother, and I. They did not take our clothes away, so we wear our regular clothes that the mothers that we brought with us. Beet soup was the soup, and I think 1 toast of bread or 2 in the morning, and that was basically the food for the day. It was winter, so it was cold outside, and we were in the barracks, and we went out there and just hung around. There was nothing to do. And in the morning there was a appeal where you had to stand in line to be counted, and then the rest of it, we trying to keep warm.
How were you able to maintain hope?
You had to hope, or else you couldn't survive. So you kept hoping that the war is going to end fast, and that we're going to get liberated.
What was the scariest memory you have from your days in Bergen-Belsen?
You really don't want to hear that one.
No, they do.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay. It just happened to be that our barrack was across an empty field. Bergen-Belsen was not a killing camp, not like Auschwitz, where they took you, they killed you. Most of the people, like 50,000 or so, died from sicknesses and typhus. And they couldn't bury them. So they literally piled them on the empty lot on top of each other. And that's when I opened the door, that's what I saw. Dead bodies just piling up on top of each other constantly. They couldn't bury them fast enough. So that was the scariest thing, is to live across a field with corpses on top of each other. I did not get sick, thank God. My mother got sick because she had to pick up from the kitchen the food and to bring it the soup. And so she developed a hernia and body problems. My sister got typhus. And then they sent her out to a death camp, death thing, and it's a very long story that she survived. She had the same thing as Aunt Frank. The kids got typhus, the girls. A lot of girls got typhus. Most of them did not survive. Anne Frank and Margot and a few other girls didn't survive. My sister did survive. When it was coming to end, there were rumors that the English or the Allied forces are winning and coming closer and closer. So everyone was trying to survive from day to day. The door opened and a tall English officer with an officer hat stood in the front of the door, and in English, we were told later what he said. He said, "You are liberated." Nobody had experience how to bring us back to normalcy, so they gave us a lot of food, and especially the men adults kept eating too much and they died, and the English eventually start realizing what's happening, and they start rationing the food and water. But that's the history of Bergen-Belsen. There were a lot of deaths from too much food after the war. The emotions were basically we're free, and what's next? Nobody knew what's going to happen. They didn't have a plan. Thank God everybody survived. My father came back, and my sister, and my mother. We had no news from my father, and it was common knowledge that after the war, the Red Cross, the Joint, all the Jewish organizations were trying to issue papers, who survived, who died. I was told later that my mother was told that my father did not survive, except one day he showed up in town, unexpectedly. So we came back to our hometown from Bergen-Belsen. We went to a private home first, and then, but eventually we made it back to Bardejov. So out of 4,000 or 3,500 Jews in Slovakia, only about 200 came back to Bardejov. We tried to live a normal life. Nobody knew what's going to happen after the war. So everybody was trying to be civil and to each other. And it worked from 45 till 48 in Bardejov, till the communists came. I went 49 to Israel, and my parents and my sister went in 1950 to Canada. I had a great time in Israel, you know. It was ecstatic to be in your own country after liberation and being in yeshiva, and you become very Zionistic, and every day was just a good experience. Nothing could go wrong. I had a hard time when I came to Canada. I was rebellious. I didn't speak to my parents for about 6 months. And they had a hard time with me till I got adjusted.
How old were you when you moved to America?
I was exactly 20 years old. In LA, when I came, I went 4 years to University of Southern California, and at night I went to yeshiva, and I got an engineering degree. But in 2005, I was forced by my children to go on a heritage tour, and I realized that it's a cop-out not to go back and not to have a history and a heritage. So I started getting interested. But it wasn't planned. It was when I came to my hometown, I wasn't happy with the shul, and the heritage that was there was destroyed, and I wanted to restore it, and that's most of my mission, is to restore the heritage in my hometown.
If you could speak to your parents today, what would you say to them?
What would I say to them? I would basically tell them, thanking them for the love that they had to go through to make us be normal. I would thank them for all the difficulties they had to go through. Because now that I'm a father and a grandfather, they must have gone through very difficult times with the children. And I would like to thank them to make us half normal. I would give anything to have some time with them. I give my fortune away to have an hour with my parents. So my message is that you guys should learn the history and think how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And I don't think enough emphasis is put on what to do so it won't happen again.